DeeDee Fallon is a director of customer success at Klaviyo and previously worked at Hubspot. She's been in the customer success space for the past 8 years and is passionate about driving long-term success for her customers.
It'll be like, well, it sounds like what a lot of companies are doing, like kind of your choice, half and half, or whatever you want to do, which I'm excited for. I cannot wait to be back with the people in office, but I'm also looking forward to a couple days not having to make the trek and the commute into the city.
All right.
So
I feel like that's like the global theme across the world. Like some people are actually like quitting if their companies are forcing them to stay.
Yeah, like I had a long commute and like, I can't imagine going back to, how did I do it?
Exactly.
How did I?
We were like superheroes.
Yeah.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Without a Roadmap, the podcast for tech folks who get the job done but are still figuring it out. My name is Yonas, joined here by my co-host Cam Curry and a very special guest, DeeDee Fallon from Klaviyo.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. It seems to go right into a little bit of your background. I see that you were previously at HubSpot. It seems like we're having a string of former HubSpotters come on the podcast. I think it makes sense
everywhere.
Since our CEO, Keith Franco, is also a former HubSpotter. So we're just bringing in the family vibes. So how about we kind of just go straight into like the first topic today. I think there's been a lot of discussion, especially on our recent podcasts with customer success folks talking about low touch versus high touch kind of CS approaches. And I think it'd be super beneficial to just dive in there and see your thoughts and approaches to low touch versus high touch and how you're currently handling that at Klaviyo.
Yes, excellent topic. That's top of mind all day and every day for myself and our entire CS and company here at Klaviyo. That's something we're actually building and continuously working on right now. From the CS standpoint, I think, low touch and scalability is so important when you think about growing companies and growing your customer base. You want to make sure that your customers have resources at their disposal, that they can use the product without friction, without needing to talk to someone. And then really building kind of a low touch model around that for our customers who are using the basics of the product. They have our academy, they have our in-app guidance, they have our support team, but they also do have some sort of CSM or CS focused folks on their accounts to help drive those really strategic conversations. On the flip side, the high touch is where I actually spend most of my time on the day-to-day, is figuring out a high touch model, but also making that scalable. So for customers, at Klaviyo, we segment it by business size. So our SMB, small to medium sized businesses, or mid-market, more of our upmarket customers, we do provide them with some high touch services from the CSM and onboarding standpoint. So while we leverage our amazing academy resources, we're also working to make that a really proactive engagement from our CS side. We do that by leveraging systems that help us determine, customers' product usage, making sure they're engaged, they're happy with Klaviyo, and identifying different touch points that we might want to reach out to customers and have them take, there's opportunities for advancements within the product or opportunities to drive success faster. So yeah, that's my standpoint on it. I think both are equally as important. Like you mentioned before, I was at HubSpot before this, and we did have a similar model where we also looked at business size for high touch and low touch, but there are a bunch of different ways that SaaS companies can do it. Business size, spend, types of companies or industries, product size, if you have multiple different products. It's important, I think, to marry the two together as you think about your customer base and what they want and how they can be most successful with the tools and with your teams.
Yeah, so I know you worked at two big Boston-based like automation companies between HubSpot and Klaviyo now. I'm curious from like a CS perspective, like what do you think can be automated, especially in the lower touch CS approaches? And like, is there a specific kind of recipe with which you can use to try and make that seem personal?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what can be automated? I think even with automation, to the point of your question, you have to think about making it a personalized experience. So while we might be sending bulk communication out to customers, it is for a very specific reason. It's not just blasting the entire customer base. So for an example, here at Klaviyo, we use customer health scores, and we've got a variety of different mechanisms and metrics that we measure that go into this customer health score. And we can segment and target our customer base if maybe they're scoring lower in one segment of the health score. Maybe it's an adoption of a specific part of the product. And we can send them targeted messages that might be automated, but it is about that specific piece of the feature that they're not taking advantage of. To take it a step further, you can personalize it if you're segmenting even further than that. So maybe it's by customer industry. Or maybe something they have or have not done in the product in the past. So I think there's a way to automate at scale while keeping it personalized and really taking that targeted approach. While you want to reach a lot of customers at once, you have to be really careful about just, for a better term, batching and blasting, which I don't think many companies will do in CS, but you need to be strategic about, why you're reaching out to someone and ensure that your automation has that value add in that personal touch that it would be if it was an individual reaching out on the account.
Those are two both very, very great answers. To kind of dive a little bit deeper into the weeds, you mentioned coming up with certain touch points, and some of those are based on product usage and some of those are based on other things that are drivers to success. How have you and the team kind of defined or thought through what you think are key drivers to success, and how do you then act upon those through either these automated plays, guides, or whatever may be the case at Klaviyo?
Yeah, so I'll talk about this in two different ways. I think at Klaviyo in our CS org, we have an onboarding period and then more of like a customer life cycle. So if you're in managed onboarding, you're usually working with an onboarding specialist, or in our scalable model, like some automation within the first 30 to 60 days to get you up and running. And we measure what we call customer milestones during onboarding. So we know what customers need to do within the product to drive long-term success. And it's been a long journey to get there. At first, and especially with a newer customer base, it's kind of on gut. Like, what are customers doing? What are we seeing? If you have a smaller base, to help them, see success. And then over time, it's going back and looking at that data like, okay, were these, 6 milestones actually accurate when we're looking at long-term retention or renewal rate or NPS or any of those factors for customers, and then tweaking it. So we're finally at a point just very recently at Klaviyo with those onboarding milestones that we've got them automated. We've done a couple rounds, we've gone back and seen that data, and we're confident, at least for now, with these, 8 milestones that help customers see success. And we really build our onboarding program around those, the automation and the high touch. Of course, those are likely to change as our customer base grows and changes, and we ensure that we do constant iterations there. And then from the standpoint of like life cycle management, I guess after a customer is onboarded, what I mentioned is that health score, and that's really how we measure that customer's success and ensuring that once they go through onboarding, we're then taking into account their overall health score of product usage. And when we think about the customer life cycle at Klaviyo, there are a lot of tools to adopt, and we realize that they might not all be utilized or adopted right in that onboarding phase. So that's where our CSMs pick it up, or our growth customer success managers, which is what we call our scalable team, the growth team. Our low touch team, in really continuing to drive that continued adoption, again, through touch points, through quarterly growth reviews that we do with customers, ensuring they're, seeing the entire value of Klaviyo and really generating ROI. So in short, that was a long answer. I'd say the onboarding milestones are really important in tracking success there. And then really comes back to that customer health score and product adoption, driving through to that actual seeing return on investment. So customers are seeing success through Klaviyo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's super helpful to hear from your perspective as somebody who's recently putting that process together. I'm curious if you can share any tips for somebody who's trying to think through, the process of defining customer milestones, outside of the product adoption and, onboarding phases. Are there any other things that you can look for that you might miss through without having an analytics tool set up?
Yeah, so something me and my team, as we were really leveraging this, ended up talking with a lot of different companies or people within our network to see how other companies were utilizing health score, and a lot of people had some different opinions or even our own experiences with health score, but we wanted to take into account like ensuring we're doing this the best way and think about it most holistically. So yes, the product adoption. The other things that I think are really important when we think about health score is customer sentiment, right? That's super important. You think about CSAT score or customer NPS and having that relate into the health score, as well as just like CSM anecdotal feedback. In talking with people, I think that's one that may be missed sometime because it could be manual, and we actually have that as a manual score within our customer health score. They could be using the product, leveraging it green in all areas, but you know a customer is risky based on a conversation you had, or they're looking at a competitor. We really rely on our CS team to input that sentiment for customers. So you look at that. I think sentiment, like I said, is most important with adoption and utilization. And then similar to adoption, we also look at literally like the ROI or the value that customers have generated in Klaviyo. It's actually ROI is something all of our customers can see within their tool, and we want to make sure that they are actually generating results. They're seeing their list grow, they're generating revenue from their email or SMS campaigns, and we tie that directly into health score as well.
Wow. I love that you bake in like the individual CSM's sentiment of how they think the customer account is doing. I feel like I agree with you. That is a missing part, because at the end of the day, it's humans talking to humans. When we're talking about any B2B SaaS company, it's always a human behind the individual account. So I love that you're baking that into your process when scoring on the health scores and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I do love that you brought up both CSAT and NPS. So here at Parler, we have a very opinionated CEO who talks a lot about NPS, and we've heard his hours of rants about NPS. So I would love to hear how your take on NPS, how it's used, and how it's used at Klaviyo.
Yeah, NPS, Net Promoter Score, is super important for any SaaS business, for any business in general. It's how likely your customers are to promote your product. I have strong opinions about NPS. I think it's super important as well. What I've found most effective, again, at both the companies that I've been at, is when NPS becomes a company-wide metric. It's not just a CS metric or product metric. It is a shared goal amongst the entire organization that you're working towards improving, maintaining, ensuring that you've got a really great NPS. And I think for me, NPS, the most important thing is following up on it, which again can be manual. So I know we're talking about scaling and automating some things. You get hopefully some comments from customers, but not all customers are leaving comments unless you're, making that required. Here at Klaviyo, it's optional, and we realize a lot of customers don't leave comments. So I'm so curious about those customers who leave a low NPS with no context. And we have a process on the CS side to actually follow up with those customers and call and email them if they're not picking up, and just see if we can get a little bit more context, which is always so helpful. And they usually have a reason, of course, why they're leaving a low NPS, but maybe couldn't articulate it in our small text box, or, really just wanted it to drive to talk to someone to give their feedback. So I think that's important. And then on the flip side, I'll say, like, those promoters, NPS, you need to make sure you're listening to the people who are your advocates and why they love Klaviyo, and ensure you continue doing that or do more of that for customers. So it's important. We at Klaviyo too, like I said, it's a company goal. And something I think that I love to boast about is that we have weekly company-wide meetings every Friday, and each week we'll share a customer story. So actually have a customer interview and ask them, we don't say, what's your NPS score for us right there live, but we ask them, what's the feedback? What's something we're doing well, and what's something we can change? In that time, we have the whole ear of the company, and it keeps us all really customer-centric and customer-focused, which is one of our values.
Yeah, I love that. Since you also talked about CSAT, how is CSAT used against or separately from NPS?
Yeah, so CSAT is measuring a specific interaction or experience. So here at Klaviyo, we have two CSAT scores currently. One is onboarding. So once a customer completes onboarding, they'll get a customer satisfaction survey with how satisfied were they with their onboarding specialist and that onboarding experience. That's allowed us to pull a lot of insights from customers. Again, I think the key is in the follow-up to those as well, even if they're leaving a little bit of text.
Right.
And just what can we do better? You know, if you've worked with other vendors before, what did they do that we didn't do that you were looking for? Or, you know, what were you really excited about to see in our onboarding experience? And that's led to some tweaks over time. And then CSAT is part of our support interactions. So we've got an amazing support team here at Klaviyo, and after whether it's an email or a chat interaction, customers will get that follow-up note with how satisfied were they with the responses from our technical team. Those are always very high, which is amazing to see, and we've got high goals for that, just to ensure they're getting timely support and that we're actually answering their questions and what they need help with within the tool.
Mm-hmm. And one last question on the topic of kind of customer satisfaction metrics. I'm curious, when you joined Klaviyo, was there a baseline score or like expectation or benchmark for these metrics, or is that something that you've had to develop over time? And, you know, what does that look like? How do you define what success looks like when you have little information previously gathered?
Yes, good question. Both CSAT and NPS, when I came on Klaviyo about 1.5 years ago, we did have goals in place and benchmarks that were set. So I'll be honest, I wasn't necessarily involved in setting those myself. But when you are, for any new metric, I think I'll speak just more generally. You always want to look at industry benchmarks and then your past performance as a team, whether it's even a small sample size, right? If you have, you know, an NPS with smaller customer base as you're growing, you always want to set some stretch goals. What we've actually found with NPS, not CSAT to date, but NPS, is that instead of having a singular NPS metric, which we have had the past year, we decided to span that out into just a range for our NPS target score, again, based on industry metrics. But what we're seeing, and what most companies probably see, is the NPS response rate can spike month over month.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on that response rate, it can either pull you up or down depending on what those are. So what those responses are. So having that range allows us, you know, it's not pinpointing the accuracy of that number, but it's ensuring that, you know, we're not totally shifting our entire strategy when we're missing NPS, if it's actually just within, you know, a range or 4 points lower, which we're still okay with. So that's been the shift that we've done probably in the past 3 months or so, as we noticed our scores month over month spiking, not a huge amount, but like 6 points or so, and wanted to ensure like this is still a good NPS, what we're targeting for, and not causing for like too much shifting one way or the other in our strategies.
Yeah, not creating too many unnecessary fires where
exactly,
a big company meeting got to change the whole strategic plan of how we want to address customers, product stuff. Yeah, I totally feel you on that.
Yeah, I really like that, the idea of the range.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So we're talking a lot about CSAT, health scores, NPS stuff. I think it kind of makes sense to kind of segue into measuring the customer success team as a whole, and then also measuring the performance of individual CSMs. So I'd love to hear you talk about how that is done at Klaviyo, if you can.
Sure. Yeah. Metrics and measurement. So the CSM team, our North Star is retention. So the inverse of churn. We want our customers to stick around and see success and remain with Klaviyo. So that is our top performance metric across the board. And it's what our CSMs are measured on for like promotions and performance reviews. We also have a couple other metrics here. So we have a secondary metric for CSM specifically, and that is average health score. So I talked a little bit about our health score and how we measured it. This is a newer metric this year, but you know, churn or retention can be a lagging indicator, as we know, some customers. So health score was a way to really stay in front of these customers, ensure we're driving a healthy install base, and really focusing the CSMs on those metrics that I mentioned, you know, NPS, ensuring that their customer is happy with Klaviyo, going to stick around, seeing ROI, and really that measurement should in turn drive a lot of their strategic conversations, right? They're using parts of the tool, they're seeing success, they're seeing revenue in return. So those are two individual metrics for CSMs. I have talked a lot about NPS, so that is obviously a company-wide metric, and we have team goals around NPS, and we're measured as an entire department. And then we also look at net retention as a metric. This is, I call this out last, not by importance, but it is also a team-wide metric. Our leaderships in each individual team is measured on net retention, which is churns, upgrades, and downgrades. So just ensuring our entire customer base is growing and seeing success. So those are what, 1, 2, 3, 4 set of those metrics for CSM teams.
Yeah, that's it. That's super interesting. That I think thinking about just the kind of world we live in today, there's probably like a lot of shifts and different factors in the world that are impacting the ways in which that customers kind of interact with our companies and our products. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on kind of how that might apply to kind of building a dynamic way for measuring the performance of your CSM team, outside of just the strict performance based on numbers, net retention. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on kind of, from a kind of personality perspective, or kind of how they approach the job and come to work every day, if that's something that's factored in.
Yes. So two lines of thoughts going with that question. Yes, a lot of things can impact that with customers. COVID, for example, huge example this past year. So Klaviyo, it focuses, our primary personas are our e-commerce businesses, our target market e-commerce businesses. So we saw e-commerce boom this past year, which was amazing. Of course, we updated our targets to make sure that we were still being competitive, but we know that customers are continuously seeing success for e-commerce, and we want to be part of growing that and continuing it. So I will just say, yes, a lot of factors, COVID being one that's obviously top of mind for a lot of businesses this past year. But yeah, from like the personality or how our CSMs or CS teams, onboarding specialists, whoever it might be, approach their customer base. So we're really looking to hire here at Klaviyo people with high slope. I love people with diverse experience. You don't need to join our team and have been an account manager or CSM and onboarding specialist before. We dig a lot into our interview process for someone who can learn quickly and is passionate about problem solving, right? So you tell me about a time where you learned something really quickly on your own, and digging into some follow-up questions there to ensure like you can learn the product, you can probably learn our processes and our systems really quickly, but are you going to bring that creative and growth mindset to your customers and help them problem solve, see more success, bring some creative ideas for their marketing campaigns? So we do that, like I said, for hiring is a big piece. And then we've done a lot of work at Klaviyo in the past year on just the really performance management. So we've rolled out something that we call a role matrix. So there are specific competencies which within each role, and think, for a CSM, it's stakeholder management, book of business management, effective communication. And we have separate ones for each role in a clear development path for each individual. So the promotion criteria is really, and success in the role is a mixture of, yes, your metrics, so your NPS, your retention, your net retention, and then how well you're doing on your role mastery. Are you developing these skills? Are you continuing to learn? So yeah, I guess to wrap that up, I would say the high slope individuals and like growth mindset, that they want to learn about the industry. They want to learn, they're curious about their customers. They want to continue to stay up to date on what's going on in the competitive space for all of their customers, so that they can bring these great suggestions to them and drive that creative partnership.
I love how thoughtful you all are thinking about developing the talent and also the team at Klaviyo, just because without the team and the people that are talking to customers every day doing the work, Klaviyo can't be as successful as it could be. So it's important to keep those people motivated, keep those people developing the skills and sets and everything they need for not only themselves to further their career, but also improve Klaviyo long term.
Absolutely. Yeah, I am very passionate about team development, about career pathing. I will, while I talk about it, I will by no means say we're all the way there. There's still obviously in any company a lot of work to do and things that we can improve on, but the direction that we're headed as a company and a CS org is really exciting to see.
Love it, love it. So since Yonas and I are both product people, we always like to ask at least one topic or question related to product stuff. So I think this will probably be the last topic of the day, but curious to hear how the CS organization plays a role in uncovering insights of new product features, adoption, things like that at Klaviyo.
Yes, we pride ourselves on being a product-led company here at Klaviyo. So we really want to ensure that, you know, our customers can use our product and see success from it without people. That being said, we ensure our CS org is that added value to even push and promote that success for customers a bit more. And we realize that we are well, there actually is a role for voice of the customer. Like we as CSMs and onboarding specialists in the support org are the voice of the customer internally, where we're talking with these customers all day, every day. So where are they getting stuck? Where do they have questions in the product? We use tools internally where our CS team can log calls in for product. They review it on a weekly basis. And then we have a monthly roadmap readout led by our product team. So they update the entire organization on here's the feedback that we got within our tool. We are using product board today. So within our tool, here's where we're seeing it. And here's how this is influencing the roadmap. There are, of course, some things that are just on with product development as well, that they're just keeping us up to date on as we continue to refresh and refine our product. So that's going really well. And something that we've just started doing, which I see as a huge value add for our customers in this internal CS and product alignment, is using Gong as a recording tool. So we use Gong, and you can actually take snippets from customer calls when we're asking. We've got some, you know, keywords in there. It's like, what's your feedback on product? They got those lines that they're asking, so we can easily search through it. And we highlight those snippets and can send them right to the product team. So whoever is the product manager on a specific tool set will be looking at those on an ongoing basis and actually hearing from the customer. And then a trend for me is all that follow-up, right? As I talk about with NPS, a lot of follow-up conversations happening from that too, that help to influence where we're focusing our time.
Love that Gong feature.
I love it. I know.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it saves a lot of time. But well, just to wrap things up, we had one last question that we wanted to drop on you. Usually we like to end with a fun question. For this week, we're wondering, what's one thing you wish you knew when you first started CS?
One thing I wish I knew when I first started, okay, I'm gonna give two, even though you asked for one.
That's okay.
My first one, I feel like it's kind of a classic one that anybody will say, but I started CS like really young in my career. It was my first job out of college, kind of figuring out what CS was. It's still fairly new. And I wish I had started networking and talking to other CS professionals earlier on. I feel like I've caught myself up and made some great relationships, but following folks on LinkedIn and commenting on their posts and then having that turn into relationships, or, you know, people at similar companies we're always willing to talk about like overall and general strategy. And I wish I started doing that earlier. So would give that advice to my younger self, or anybody starting in CS, just talk about customer success. Most people in customer success, we've got that customer service gene. We want to talk about customers and what works and doesn't. So form those relationships. And then my second piece would be, again, more like self-feedback to myself. I would have started like experimenting and trying different things within my customer base. I think back to my CSM days a little bit sooner. There's no perfect customer journey. And now being in a leadership position, I really rely on my individuals and onboarding and support and CSMs to surface like what are different things that they want to be trying out to resolve a friction point, to make the customer experience better. And it's so helpful that I would just encourage anybody, you know, in any position to do experimenting. It's never, in most cases, I won't say never, in most cases, it's not harmful, as you know, as long as you know what you're trying to measure and what you're trying to get as the outcome. And if something doesn't work, you just make a quick pivot or try something else. And we'll just encourage everybody to do that, 'cause I think that's where we get some of our most creative solutions.
Awesome. Lovely two answers there. I think that's helpful for anybody, I think, across any industry, any career path. Experiment more and also networking, because you learn so much from talking to other people, and also maybe explaining some things that you're doing currently to other people. You kind of just learn more of what's working for yourself and what's not working. So I appreciate you. We both appreciate you coming on the show today. for all our listeners out there, be sure to like and subscribe, as Casey always points out to me.
Yes, thank you guys. Yonas and Cam, thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed our conversations. Hopefully I'll be welcome back again soon. We can talk about some other topics.
Of course. Love to have you back.
Thank you.